Brothers and sisters, the House of Israel, thank you so much for joining me today for this final video on the new moon and the Sabbath. And I'm just trying to get my thoughts all together. I've just had one download after another over the outcome of this, and it's just been amazing. And I hope that it has helped each of you understand the importance of true Sabbath worship and what the Lord was implementing when he walked on the earth and why it was called the Lord's Sabbath. Every one of his teachings must come to life within us. And that is the whole process of him returning to redeem the house of Israel. That the teachings that he taught will truly be the fullness of the gospel, of the kingdom gospel, will truly be restored within his people, and then it will be able to flood the earth with his truth. So I'm eternally grateful for this process that the Lord has taken me through, and for this opportunity to share with the house of Israel so that this work can truly move forward. As always, I invite each and every one of you to invite Christ into your presence. I invite you to each take everything that is said, any questions that come into your mind, take them to the Lord. He can answer all things for you. And I truly pray and invite the Lord to work through me and in me, that his Spirit may witness of the truths in which he has walked me personally through. So, understanding God's laws of the Sabbath, the new moon and the Sabbath, and how they correlate with one another is so amazing. And as he's taking me through this process, like I said, I'm trying to get my thought process together because I just feel like my insides are exploding with just pure joy. The good news of the gospel is truly that it is such good news, and it is just pure joy. And that's the best I can explain it. I feel like, I told a friend yesterday, I feel like fireworks were going off in my home all day long. It's just amazing. It truly does make every bit of your spirit rejoice. So I would like you to get out your Bible, because he's taking me to a couple verses in the Bible, but Genesis 1 is going to be really important in understanding this. And as I went through these teachings, it's really important to understand that all that has been taught is the spiritual aspect of what Christ has to do first. Let me just read what he had instructed me. So all that has been taught is spiritual, as the earth has to go through this cleansing process of dividing the darkness from the light. So God's eternal truths, his light, can be brought back in. Then the Lord can return physically. But first, he has to come to redeem his house spiritually. And so in that, he's telling me to go to the scripture. So redeeming his house spiritually. In Matthew 16, I'm just going to turn to this really quick so that I don't miss anything that he wanted me to share. In Matthew 16, everything that we do, we're supposed to become spirit-led. And he asked his disciples in 13, whom do men say that the Son of Man am? And they said, some say that thou art John the Baptist, some Elias, and others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. He said unto them, now this is really important, but who do ye say that I am? And who do we personally say that Christ is? Who is he personally in our life? What is he doing for us that we can personally witness of who Christ is? So But whom say ye that I am? And Simon Peter answered and said, Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. So this is going to be really important in the spiritual prison that I will talk about in a minute, the living God. And Jesus answered and said unto them, Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed this unto thee, but mine Father which is in heaven. And that's how it truly works. The world can tell us all their understandings of who they believe Christ is. But to truly know Christ, and when he asks, whom do you say that I am? That understanding of that personal walk with Christ as he takes us back into the presence of a living God, and Christ becomes living in us, and we serve a living God, it is revealed to us who the Son is through the Father. And I say unto thee that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And that's powerful. He's building his rock, his church, upon the power of the Spirit revealed from the Father, who Christ is, as Christ takes us through this redemption process. And I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Then charged he his disciples, that they should tell no man that he was Jesus the Christ. So it is not our place to tell anyone who Christ is. It is for each one of us individually in our own life to discover Christ for ourselves, so that Christ can walk us through this beautiful process of he visits this. We were in spirit prison ourselves, in the bondage of this world, and the bondage of the belief system and the religious system, everything of the belief system of this world. We were in spirit prison. We lived in a place of dead works, and Christ becomes that living work within us. And as he walks us through this process, we go from a state of dead work to living works. And that is an opportunity for each and every one of us. And that is how he will build his church. And the gates of hell will not prevail against it, because we are spirit-led. Christ lives in us. We know him personally, one-on-one. We have that intimate relationship, that friendship, that bond, that eternal connection with him. And that is part of this Sabbath worship, is it is so intimate and so one-on-one and so absolutely beautiful. I cannot even put into words how amazing true Sabbath worship is. So a question that he wanted me to ask before I go any further into Genesis 1 is, God, the whole purpose of this, of Christ coming to redeem the house of Israel, is to take us back into covenant. Back into the covenant with the Lord, following his guide. So he gives the guideline of what this looks like. He gives that to us, the guideline for us. So we enter back into that new covenant, just like with the promises made to our fathers. Now they are being made again to us, and we are no longer being guided by man. So the new covenant is truly to be guided and directed in all things by the Lord himself in our lives. So in your Sabbath worship that is dictated by man, the question is, in the four Gospels that Christ walks us through, on the Sabbath, he cast out devils, he healed, he opened the eyes of the blind, the deaf heard, the lame walked, the leopards are cleansed. There were so many miracles that were done on the Sabbath. In our life, do we have that happening for us? What infirmities is he healing us from? Opening the eyes of the blind. He's taking us from those voids of darkness and the veil over this earth. And he's revealing his light and his truth. And he's opening the eyes of the blind if we're willing to see it for what it is. The deaf will hear. What will we hear? We will now hear the voice of the Lord. And it will truly chase out the voice of the accusers, the voice of the adversary. It will shut the mouths of lions, because we have lions coming at us from all directions with all different philosophies and understandings, and Christ silences it all. He truly silences it all. And so the deaf will hear. But what? So the deaf, all we've been able to hear is the understanding of this world. And now we will truly hear his voice. The lame will walk. Okay, we are the lame, and we can't walk on our own. We've been trying to walk with this world, and we still are left in a place of confusion and void. Now the Lord is going to show us how to walk with him and to walk on our own through the example that he will walk us through. So that we no longer need the world to be that crutch for us, because now Christ walks with us. The leopards are cleansed. We talked about every sin being made as white as snow. Those sins within us, he cleanses that. He shows us the tree of good and evil, and what is good and evil in God's eyes, not the world's, because we have to remember this world has been Satan's kingdom for many, many, many thousands of years. And so what the world considers evil, the Lord's going to show you this knowledge of good, and the tree of good, he's going to give us the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, and we're going to see it as God sees it, as the Son sees it. We're going to see what true evil and good look like. He's going to walk us through that process. So in your Sabbath worship through the world, have you ever witnessed any of these things take place? Do you witness this in your Sabbath worship in these congregations? And that's a question only you can answer for yourself. So he's asked me to go to Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. So he created both. They're mirroring each other. We talked about this. Or that's the purpose, is they are supposed to mirror each other. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So where we are now, and this is he's having me show this example, is we have truly been in this place in this world that has been without form, so that the laws of God have been ruled over by the darkness, and so in this world, and so we have voids within us. So let me start over. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. So darkness that this earth has infiltrated each and every one of us with creates voids of darkness within us, that the Lord, through the Spirit of God moving upon us, heals us from. And that's when he opens the eyes of the blind and opens the ears of the deaf so that they can hear. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, and it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And that's literally where we are now in the work of God, is that he is dividing the light from the darkness. The darkness can no longer exist within God's people. And that is the whole purpose of Christ promising to come to redeem the house of Israel, so that the whole earth can have the eternal truths of the kingdom gospel of God and not what man has infiltrated it with. So God is separating the darkness from the light at this point. So he wants me to go over. I'm really sorry. Hold on just a minute. I'm going to pause this. Sorry about that. It is really, really smoky. And it is just, I can't seem to clear my throat today. So there's a lot to this, and I'm going to keep it as basic as I can so that the understanding that needs to be there is there. So understanding the new moon phases and how this works is that the new moon is when, so we just went over, he's dividing the darkness from the light, and in the beginning there was darkness. So I'm going to share it in the way that the Lord has given it to me and how he's had me do it over the past year. So the new moon represents the beginning of the calendar month for God. And I encourage each of you to maybe get a calendar so you can have a visual of this. And so the new moon worship begins the evening of the new moon when there's no light in the sky, because and let me see, he given this to me and I can't remember. Okay, I'm just gonna leave that. I can't remember. He had shared something with me on that and I cannot remember what it was, so I'm just gonna leave it alone. So there is no light being shown the night that God's calendar begins. Oh, I know what it was. Okay, so God calls the first day the evening and the day. He does not include the night in that. And so as we understand that, true Sabbath worship goes from evening to evening. So it's from the evening when the new moon is going to appear. So if we go back to the August 27th was the night of the new moon. So that evening begins our Sabbath worship, because during that night there is no light. But the day of the 28th, we bring in the light. So God's people are ushering in the light, the truth. So then from that day forward, so from the 28th, that sets the cycle for that month. So on the 28th was the new moon feast, and then that sets it for September. So September 4th, September 11th, and September 18th. So after the new moon, there's always 3 Sabbaths. And let me explain. So if we understand the symbolic of the 6 days of creation, as I talked about yesterday, living in those 6 days of creation, doing the work that has been asked of us by the Lord, and living in those 6 days of creation unblemished from the world. So the Sabbath being on the 7th day, because we come into completion and wholeness, the work is done. And so that is why, so from the new moon, we just count 6 days, and on the 7th day, we know that it's the Sabbath. So if you never have a calendar in front of you, you're looking at the phases of the moon. So when there is no moon in the sky and it is completely darkened, that is when the God's calendar begins. So we go from evening to evening. So the seventh day represents completion and wholeness. And, okay, I'll go over this in a minute. I'm trying to do the best that I can with this. There's a lot to it, and I'm trying to just follow along with what he gave me. The new moon. So if we go back to the new moon, so let's just stay on the new moon for a minute. The new moon begins the month cycle with no light. This can fall on the 8th and 9th day from the previous month. So what's interesting about that is 8 represents renewal. So Christ renews us, and we feast with him as we all gather together to feast. And it's a celebration. So if you look at what he taught, like with the wedding feast, it's a true celebration of all those souls being brought back to Christ from that previous month. So he is taking the people to that place of renewal and feast with him. So the new moon can fall on the 8th day, and it can also fall on the 9th day. And the 9th day is a conjunction. And let me read. He asked me to read this. So it's not always, it can vary between the 8th day and the 9th day, and that's what he's wanting me to show you here. So let me explain these numbers of 7, 8, and 9 in the Hebrew understanding. So 7 represents completeness, resurrection, to be whole, to be sanctified, good, perfected, the 7th day, millennial reign of Christ, divine completion. The 8th represents eternity, new creation, so renewal, new creation, first in new series, new birth, new beginnings. So the number 8, so that new moon can fall on the 8th and the 9th. And then we have the 9th. So I hope that you can all track with me here. I'm sorry, I'm trying to do the best that I can. So 9 represents God's kingdom and what they are doing to combat the darkness. So if we understand the 9, 9 in Hebrew is translated as snake, twisting, and encircling. And what has Satan done to this earth? He has twisted and encircled everything with his work. And so if we go to John 10:10, it says, "The thief cometh not, but for to steal and to kill and to destroy." But here's the promise in this. I am come that they might have life. And I just talked about Christ takes us to a place of serving a living God. Christ becomes living in us. Everything becomes living. We go from that dead work to living work. So that they may have life. So if we think we came here, we have life. No, we've had bondage, and that has not been life. It has not been the fullness of what God promised his people. Okay, so I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. And that's the whole purpose of this, is that we may have life and have it more abundantly in the truths of eternity, and remembering why we're here, the God we serve, the beauty of this amazing plan, and why we had an amazing Savior that chose to sacrifice all for us, so that now we could be walked through this process for ourselves. That where he is, we may be also. So then he wanted me to share this, and I knew that the Lord had told me on this past Sabbath that I needed to now finish these teachings, and this week that they needed to get done. And so as I was looking at this calendar so I could instruct and help people see it for what the beauty that it is, he took me to the next new moon actually falls on the night of the 25th. So, and the next day, the 26th, is actually Rosh Hashanah, which is the Feast of Trumpets. But if we understand that God's day is the evening and the day, Rosh Hashanah would start the evening of the 25th. The new moon, and that new moon is hold on, he's showing me something here. Okay, so the new moon, Sabbath, starts the evening of the 25th. And that would begin Rosh Hashanah, which is also called the Feast of Trumpets. And in Jewish traditions, that is their 10 days of repentance for the year. And that is a really, he's showing me there is a very profound purpose why the Sabbath is falling on that particular time this year. So please take that to the Lord for your own understanding. And it will make more sense in just a minute when I go over traditions that God's traditions that he's taken me through of God's laws, and that this Feast of Trumpets is very key in this Rosh Hashanah and in this Sabbath that will fall from the 25th, the evening of the 25th through the evening of the 26th. So again, these teachings at this time are for the house of Israel. And this is what he has shared with me, that where much is given, much will be required. To perform the true Lord's Sabbath according to God's calendar, this will be a sacrifice to perform the laws of God and perform the Lord's Sabbath on each month, because each month it changes days. So look at our Sabbath worship now. It's just dictated by a man, and we have followed that Sabbath, according to the traditions of our fathers, or according to the traditions of the world. And it's easy to just set aside and say, okay, we're following the world and the Sabbath is on Sunday, and that's when we all worship, and we just work our schedules around that. But how much more sacrifice is it for us to perform true Sabbath worship when, this month it is on Sunday, in October, or beginning, I guess, the last week in September, now it falls on a Monday, and it can fall on a Tuesday and a Wednesday and a Thursday and a Friday and a Saturday. And are we willing to uproot the patterns of our lives to truly have a day of rest and true worship with the Lord, worshiping him? Because we have jobs, our kids have school, we have all these things that we just do during the week. And so where is the true sacrifice in the worship that the world has implemented? And it's just been, it wasn't implemented by the world, it was actually implemented by a Catholic priest, and the world just followed. But what would that sacrifice look like for you to follow the Lord's Sabbath according to God's calendar, of it falling on a Tuesday or a Thursday or a Saturday? That's a question for you to ask. As we watch the moon phases, the moon will go from the new moon, which is no light at all, and it goes through a waxing, full moon, and waning, and I might have the waxing and the waning mixed up. But those 4 phases are what the moon is going to go throughout the month. So he asked me to do this breakdown because I guess he asked, understanding just the new moon itself is really key, because if there are no calendars in front of us and we are just looking for the signs in the heaven, which is what we're supposed to do. The signs in the heavens were given to us for God's purposes. So if we're looking to the moon and we understand that that's, okay, there's no light in the moon at all. This is the new moon. This is the Sabbath worship. And then we can count those 6 days, and the seventh day is the day of worship. That's why understanding that new moon is so important. So we talked about, I'm going to go over some basic steps, and then, everything has to become Spirit-led in our lives. And so at that point, I'm going to walk you through the rest of this. My work's done, and it's up to each of you to turn to the Lord and allow him to walk you through this, because it truly is beautiful. So the Sabbath goes, as we talked about, from evening to evening. And we start each Sabbath, from what the Lord has shown me, is by blowing a shofar, and we end the Sabbath by blowing a shofar. And I did not know this when he instructed me to do this over a year ago, and I was just like, okay, I'm going to learn to blow the shofar, and I have no idea why. But as he's walked me through the darkness that has to be dispelled, it was probably 5 or 6 months ago, he led me to just this blowing of shofar from this man in Jerusalem. And it was 10 minutes of this man blowing the ram's horn, the shofar. And they were doing it because it chases out darkness. And I was like, oh my gosh. So it was really powerful and beautiful to me to have that understanding, because I'm like, well, why are we blowing the shofar? But the blowing of the shofar is done at the beginning of our worship and at the end to close it. And understanding Rosh Hashanah, the Feast of Trumpets, is really key with understanding why we blow the shofar. So fasting, on the 3 Sabbaths that come after the new moon feast, fasting, and this is not what the world believes as fasting. This fasting represents a cleanse from the world as a whole, meaning that, like, anything in the world we just choose not to take into us, because we're in worship with the Lord. That doesn't mean that the Lord can't send us somewhere to enjoy his beauty, or whatever it looks like. It's dictated, it's all Spirit-led from the Lord. But this cleansing, it's every 7 days, that completion and wholeness. And now we're being cleansed from basically the world from the last 6 days. And so let him walk you through what that fasting looks like for yourself. But it is not a fasting as the world has said, oh, fasting is a sacrifice. Take that to the Lord. Linen is really important in this, and it's talked about in the book of Ezekiel. And again, let the Lord walk you through that process. You spend that day in the one-on-one worship with the Lord, being Spirit-led through that worship and what that will look like directly for you. And the reason this is one-on-one is because as he takes us through this redemption process, only the Lord knows what your individual process is and what you have experienced in your life and what needs to happen for you individually. And so it is all truly Spirit-led in this worship and in this time with the Lord. And in that praise and worship of the bondage that he's removing us from, of these false traditions of the world, and the infiltration that has been truly since the fall. That was the whole purpose of the fall. Is so then that we could remember and we could partake of that tree of knowledge of good and evil, so we could truly see for ourselves, and we could desire that, and see as God and Christ see good and evil for what it truly is, and not what the world has said that it is. And I think that there's, oh goodness, I didn't write it down, but it's in Genesis, where The whole purpose of partaking of the tree of knowledge of good and evil is so that we can become like God and his son, and we can truly see the truth. So he takes us through his teachings, and this is where the new covenant comes into play. In the 4 Gospels, he will literally take us through those teachings, and he will open them up in ways that we never saw before, and it's powerful and beautiful and amazing. And he truly he becomes our guide. And this is the process of he promised he would come to redeem the house of Israel, and this is part of our redemption process. So this is part of our redemption process as we stand at the gate and enter back into covenant, and enter into that new covenant with Christ as our guide. So, brothers and sisters, we at this point hopefully have chosen the God that we serve and the kingdom in which we are part of. We haven't chosen, we understand now the part of the kingdom in which we are part of. And like I shared throughout the videos, we can either remain in Babylon, or we can move forward in the work that the Lord has for us in the return of his kingdom. Because as I shared in the very first video on the new moon and the Sabbath, the kingdom of God is here, and they're here, and no devil in hell can stop that. It's already happened, and it's here. And that's it's so beautiful. I don't even have words to explain how beautiful that is. But as we understand what Christ taught, that the gates of hell shall not prevail against his church, because they are spirit-led in all things. Individually, each person is being spirit-led in bringing the kingdom, gathering the house of Israel back together with those eternal truths in that fullness of the kingdom gospel of God. And that is the beauty in all this. Brothers and sisters, I encourage you to sit with the Lord and let him walk you through this process. It is beautiful. It is amazing. Yes, it will require sacrifice, but I promise you, your life will forever be changed, and it will just, what is unveiled that the world has veiled over you will be worth any sacrifice that we could ever make, because to be brought back into the fullness and to remember the remembrance of all things that God has for us is truly amazing. And I encourage you to, again, take this to the Lord for your own understanding. And I pray that this helps. I pray that we will step back into this understanding of God's laws and worshiping on the true Sabbath day that was ordained by God and not ordained by a man. I testify of the truths that I have shared over these past, I guess 6 videos, I believe, in which the Lord has walked me through. I am human just like all of us. I'm a daughter of God trying to do the best I can with what I've been given. And I testify that these are eternal truths. And if there's any error that has been made, it's been made by me trying to do the best that I can with what the Lord has directly given me. And so I encourage all of you to take it to the Lord for your own understanding. So God bless, and I look forward to the amazing events that will transpire because of this.